Hello, everybody. Justin Stivers here. Thank you guys for tuning in to the Stivers show. Very excited about our guest today, Miss Lorinda Gonzalez. Lorinda is the founder and owner of a really cool company called Grants Inc. What they do, and I'll let her, explain it better than I can, but essentially teaching and showing other nonprofits organizations how they can write and procure grants. And so I had the opportunity to meet her briefly a couple weeks ago at the Center for Social Change. And so what I know about her, she's doing really awesome work. So I'm very excited to have her on. And thanks for joining us, Lorinda.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome. So I guess, where I always start is, who are you? What do you do? How'd you get into it? That sort of thing.
So I, well, like I said, my name's Lorinda. I'm originally from New York. I've lived in Florida, though, most of my life now. I started in Grants Inc., actually doing grant writing, because before this, I had another company where we worked mostly with marketing writing, and I used to do editorial work for PhD students. So I kind of came from the educational side of things. And then over time, I started getting involved in grants because I saw the impact that the writing would have and what I was able to do, that skill set in helping acquire funds to support nonprofits. So that became my passion right around 2015. So then I closed down the other organization that we had and opened up this one. And that's what I've been focused on doing since, is really working directly with nonprofits to support them, giving them the education and tools they need to learn how to write grants and acquire funds.
And where did that inspiration come from to be in that space, to be in the nonprofit space?
So I found it's interesting. I found when I was working for marketing firms that while I enjoy the creative side of the writing, I felt like the work and the energy I was putting into it really wasn't going anywhere. Like there was no bigger benefit or bigger why. And I went through a little bit of a burnout, probably around 2015 in the beginning of that year. And I went on my first vacation. I was very much a workaholic and I was working all the time and wasn't feeling a lot of joy in what I was doing. And I went on a family vacation and kind of had a spiritual experience and realized that there was more that I could do. So my first time playing, messing around with grants was actually years before. My partner, he was in the grant field as well. He worked for the local community college, and he had worked with grants, more on the management side, and had kind of told me, hey, you should look into grants. I think this would be a really, something you would really enjoy and be really good at. So what I did was I started looking at books just online in the library to see what I could find as far as how to do grants, what the keys were, things like that, to really understand conceptually what it was. And I did my first grant. It was a $200,000 grant. The client was awarded, and then I was just hooked on it because I realized that I was able to do this work and actually focus on these, these practices. And then, it would in turn result in great products for the clients. And I mean, it's the money that would come and actually help the community. So it was awesome.
That's yeah. I've seen, I don't know too much about that world, but when I was in the Peace Corps, I know that was one of the big things that we had to do was, trying to, get money for these organizations and writing grants. It's definitely a unique skill set to be able to do. So do you work with a specific type of nonprofit, specific types of work, or who's your kind of, typical client?
So we have two levels. It's interesting. We work with a lot of new organizations, a lot of grassroots organizations on the educational side of things. So they a lot of times don't have the funds available to necessarily hire a grant team or to hire a grant writer, but they are themselves doing the work. So I work with them quite often on the educational side. We give them the tools and the training so they could do it on their own. And then we also have the other side of things, which are going to be your mid-sized to larger nonprofits that maybe they don't want to have a full grant team yet. Maybe that's a little bit too much for them, but they need somebody to come in and help guide their department directors or guide their programs and such. So then I'll go in and work with them and kind of oversee and overview of what their activities have been, what they've applied to, been denied, been accepted. And then we create like a strategic plan to help them boost funds. So we have kind of like the two sides of clientele that we work with.
Is it just you, or you have people working with you, or?
There's 5 of us in total now. We actually just grew. It's so interesting in January. So it was primarily just me. I've had a manager of operations with me, Yvonne, for about a year. And then in January, we decided to really expand because I wanted to focus more on the educational part of it. And I also wanted to kind of step out of the grant writing and do more of overseeing it. So we hired we have 2 new grant writers, 1 researcher, myself, and then our operations manager. So we're a team of 5 now.
That's great. And have you all, we're kind of in the midst of this, like I say, zombie apocalypse. Have you been affected or felt it, or?
We have in that, the good thing is that since we're all virtual, and again, that was something that was just kind of like intuition to go virtual. So in that aspect, we're still able to work regularly. But the impact we've seen is that unfortunately our nonprofits are extremely impacted by what's going on. We've had a lot of them that just don't know what to do. We have funders now that are not opening funds like they used to. So we're having to change a lot of strategic plans, and we're having to reapproach funders. And there's been a few that have said, listen, we either have a choice to pay for these services, or go, pay our direct services. And of course you go with direct services. So we've had kind of a shift in that. And we found that even the way that we're communicating what to do in this time is really changing. So even the way we're planning out, we used to plan out 3, 6, 9, 12 months out of grant applications to submit. Now we're having to really shift that because we don't know what funders are going to fund. We don't know when this is going to end. So it's definitely there's been a shift in communication.
Is there like a percentage of we need to apply for X amount of grants, and we apply for 5, and we think based on 5 we're going to get 1, or I don't know if that's on base or even a valid question.
Yeah. So the way that we do it is a little bit different. It's a little bit non-traditional. A lot of organizations will look at it and they'll say, okay, let's just apply exactly like you said. Let's apply for 5 grants. Hypothetically, we'll get 1 or 2, and that's enough. So I have a different approach. I like to look at the strategic side of things. I'm very much analytical minded. So what I always encourage nonprofits to do is to always apply for at least 3 at a time and constantly have grants that are out. So don't have like a final number, like we're going to apply to this many and that's all we're going to do. Instead, look at it as just a business activity, but a rolling business activity that you're always either applying for new funds, waiting for feedback from a funder, or researching new opportunities on a regular basis. And that process of really, enacting that and having these month-to-month activities, and it doesn't really take a lot of time once you have your system set up, but doing that really leads to a lot of sustainability. And we've had clients that have grown quite a bit by doing this over time. So,
do you see, is this something, I would imagine on the smaller scale, smaller nonprofit just starting out, they're trying to bootstrap, right? And so they want to do this themselves. But that might almost be like what Catch-22 prohibits them from even being able to grow, because they maybe don't know the process as well. So is there what advice or what do you tell maybe some of these nonprofits that, I don't know if it's, you maybe could do it yourself, right? Like, so it's maybe something you could try to do yourself, but we're better. So, and
right.
So is that a common conversation?
It is. So what happens a lot of times is they do want to do it on their own. They want to save money. And I understand because their resources are very limited. And there is a certain aspect of this that you can do on your own, but like you mentioned, it is going to limit you because you only can put so much time and attention onto certain things. And if you need to serve your individuals, serve your people, your demographic, and now you're spending all this time on grant writing, it's going to be difficult. So kind of like the middle grounds, and what we do is in the beginning, we'll encourage a nonprofit to do some training, learn some of these fundamentals, and maybe work with us on a very small scale. And we can just provide some consultancy to get them going, get their process going. And then over time, once they start bringing in funds, what we see is then they're able either to hire someone else, or usually they stay with us and we'll, provide more and more services. But to do it completely on your own, what happens is that they end up spending so much time doing it on their own, and they're in kind of a cloud of confusion, and they're applying to the wrong funds, or they're applying incorrectly, or they're thinking that's a good match and it really isn't. And so they end up wasting a lot of time. And I've had a lot of nonprofits that come to me like, oh, I've been doing this on my own for a year, 2 years, and we're not getting any funds. And then, we can work with them and kind of navigate and figure things out. And within 6 months to a year, now they're starting to bring in these sustainable funds. So it's kind of like me, like if I have an issue with, like, I'm not technology really savvy, but outside of the basics. So I have an IT person that's going to help me with that. So I found as a business owner, entrepreneur, there's certain things you just are not good at, and it's more bang for your buck, so to speak, because time is more valuable than money. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes it's good to get the expert to kind of handle it. And we work very closely with organizations. We're not just doing everything for them. We're working in tandem with them to get things done. And I find it's more valuable that way.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Do you find that some of these nonprofits are trying to just bring people in-house, like a professional grant writer, and is that your kind of competition there, or is that?
So I find it's interesting. I find that happens in larger nonprofits, but there tends to sometimes be a little bit more turnover than they would prefer. I've seen 2 situations. I've seen situations where very large nonprofits will hire a staff person, and that person will stay with them 10, 20 years, 10, 15 years, and then they're gone, and now they have to start over and find somebody new. It just depends on what how much you want to spend on a financial perspective, because hiring us as consultants is significantly cheaper than hiring a staff person, because you're not dealing with benefits, you're not dealing with office space, you're not dealing with all those things. But it kind of just depends on what they like. There are some people that want the grant writer to just kind of do everything internally. And sometimes the staff person works, but a lot of times what happens is that since you are working with multiple departments, it's nice to have an outside person come in and kind of just review everything. So what I do is I kind of come in as the unbiased voice, and I speak to the director, and I speak to the president, and I speak to finance, and figure out what the issues are, and I come up with a plan so that everything can flow a little bit better. And this seems to be a better, but the people that prefer a full-time grant writer, it's just a different type of organization.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So that's, kind of the core business of, getting hired by these firms, by these nonprofits to help them. What about I know you talked a little bit about the training side of things. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that's really exciting for me. It's actually one of my favorite projects that we're working on. For the past at least 4 years now, I've been developing training materials, and I teach workshops on a regular basis, quite a bit at the Center for Social Change. I've taught at University of Miami. I've taught out of state in a couple different places. But what it is that I've kind of created a framework of how to do grant writing to make it very streamlined and make it less stressful. And that's something that I just created because I was doing it as a job. So then what I do is I've transferred that into an actual training program, and we have multiple workshops. So we have now a Grants Inc. University, just went live. Now with the quarantine, since I've had more time working from home, been able to dedicate more time into that, but we've put that live. We have, I think, 5 classes that are up right now.
Right, perfect time for that.
Perfect timing, exactly.
Yeah.
It was, it's like, why not? And the thing is, it was interesting how we turn you can turn a negative into a positive, like I've been delaying it, and I've had a lot of interest in it, but I'm like, oh yeah, I'll get to it. Well, now, now we've gotten to it, and it's exciting for me to have that going.
Yeah. And so what's kind of the, nuts and bolts of that?
So right now what we have up there are a couple of free classes and a couple of paid classes. And the free classes are all resources, right? So there's a lot of free resources that we provide, because unlike a lot of other, just a traditional grant writer is usually just a person doing a grant application, but we have like a whole research team. So the research team will go and actually look up foundations and grant programs that are available for individuals to apply to. And they're doing this on a regular basis. And we have access to a lot of tools that can be very expensive for a nonprofit to purchase. And we have access to that, and we use these tools to curate these lists. So we have these free classes that has all these lists listed of foundations and things that people can approach. That's one side of it. The other side of it is we have the DIY grant program that we do in collaboration with the Center for Social Change. And there's two mini classes where you learn the fundamentals of grant writing, how to do research, things of that nature. And then once you get into the third class, now we're doing one-on-one work together. So you get, I think it's like 8 hours of instruction through video, and then you get a time to meet with me, or we can meet in a group if there's enough people registered, and we actually apply to a grant together. You're scored on the grant, and at the end of the course, and I've done this intensive program at the center a few times in person, but at the end of it, you have a completed grant application that you can submit to funders, and then we also provide guidance through that submission process. So that's really cool, because you get to put yourself in that whole process and feel what it's like to apply to a grant. And then people that have taken the class are like, oh, it's not as bad as I thought. And it also, more than that, creates some collaboration and networking, because you don't feel like you're alone. Because we have a lot of people that are in nonprofits, they're responsible for grant writing activities, and yet they have no support from anyone that knows how to do it. So we like to try to be that support for them.
I think that's great. And again, perfect timing for that. Last, I know we're kind of coming up on our time, but what do you suggest for, maybe people, there's probably a difference, right? There's probably people starting nonprofit and people already, a little bit more seasoned. What if the advice is different? I always like to, have our people on the show give, actionable advice. What type of advice would you give for maybe the person thinking about starting a nonprofit, or in the very beginning stages, and the person who's maybe got a little bit more of a seasoned nonprofit?
So I would say that, believe it or not, considering the situation that we're in now with the coronavirus and all that's going on, it's going to be very similar advice. Things are not going to be the same after this. Things are not the same now. Things are changing. So now is an amazing time to really focus on your mission, really define what your mission and vision is. What is the impact that you want to create in the world? And think about the world that we're living in now, that everything has become super dependent on the online community. We're all using Zoom now. We're all doing video calls and things of that nature. So we need to think about creating resilient programming and resilient services, that if something, hopefully this never happens again, but this is going to change the way things are. programs and services that can still serve people, but in a way that maybe doesn't have the physical aspect to it. But thinking about resiliency and thinking about different ways to manage programs and services. So if you're a new nonprofit, think about that. Think about how you can embrace the online world. And I'm finding this also with funders, because we work with funders a lot. They're saying the same thing. They want to see programs and services that are resilient in these types of situations. So even for seasoned nonprofits, to keep your doors open, you need to start thinking about how to shift and change your programs and services to still have impact, but in a way that's more digital.
Yeah, that's very timely advice. You personally seem like very entrepreneurial spirited. Is this the end all be all, or is more stuff, do you see yourself in the grant world indefinitely, or more stuff on the horizon?
No, so definitely more stuff on the horizon. I think entrepreneur is probably, if there's a label I put on myself, it would be that before even grant writer. I'm very much a creator, and I like to create content and share information, and have an idea of transparency is really big for me. So I like to learn things, research things, and then share it with everyone. So for now, it's in the grant world, it's expanding into the online education, and I'm excited to see what it'll be in the next few years.
Awesome. Well, I'll be watching to see what that is. Lorinda, thank you so much. How can people find you? How can they get involved with Grants Inc.? How can they learn more about the university? Plug away.
Awesome. So the best way for Grants Inc., both of them is going to be grantsinc.com, and it's INK, not INC. So grantsinc.com and grantsincuniversity.com. Both of those are live. That's the best way to reach me, or also by email. It's going to be my first name, Lorinda, which is LORINDA, at grantsink.com. Those are the best ways to reach us and see what we're doing.
Awesome. All right, Lorinda, thank you so much. Thank you guys for watching, and stay safe out there. Talk to y'all soon.